Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have very big news coming out of Israel, Iran, Ukraine, Russia, and the United States. But by far our biggest piece of news of the day is coming out of Israel, as we have gotten word that the Yemeni rebels fired a missile at Israel last night. The missile made it through all of Israel's air defenses and struck the Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv. It caused damage to the runway, but luckily did not hit the airport itself. But we've heard out of that the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has vowed to attack Iran in response for the attack on the airport. So major escalations in Israel, and also we've heard another major escalation in Iran, that more explosions are taking place across their country even today, even after the major ones yesterday, and this appears to be an ongoing theme in Iran right now. We've also gotten big word as well that between India and Pakistan, the Indians have cut off a major dam with water flow going to Pakistan, and this is the first time they've cut that one off so far, and we do have that on camera. And we also have big news coming out of Russia and Ukraine of more attacks on Russia by the Ukrainians, and also we're getting more word about Putin threatening to use nukes once again in the war against Ukraine. But with that, we're now jumping into our first article of the day, which goes to World Source News 24/7. And right now, this is our biggest story of the day. Last night, around 1 a.m. Central Time, we did see that there was a massive attack carried out by the Yemeni rebels from Yemen on Israel, and so specifically central Israel last night. And you can see right here on the map, there are all the locations where the alerts were sounding in central Israel, near Tel Aviv, and also other areas right outside of Jerusalem. And we did see that last night, and a lot of missiles were intercepted by the Israelis, but unfortunately one did make it through, and we learned about that this morning and saw the damage from it in our next post here, which goes to open source intel. And we can see in this post right here that the IDF confirms it failed to intercept the Yemeni rebel ballistic missile that struck the Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv, and thankfully it did not strike the airport facility itself. It struck right next to it on a runway, and it did stop the flights, but it did not ultimately strike anybody or cause any casualties according to the current reports we're getting right now. But nonetheless, it did strike the airport and cause quite a scare. So let's take a look at our first video and see the attack in its full scale. So right there you can see there is the smoke rising from the location of the impact of the ballistic missile right on the side of the runway. And also there appears to be another civilian panicking as the missile did strike near the airport, and as you can see they're running down the side of the concourse of the airport itself, trying to get away from the danger. And also appears the sirens are also going off in the background as well. And there's another view out of a window showing the smoke and the location of the impact. And as you can see, it was not the airport terminal itself that was struck, it was right next to it. And there's another view from an exterior angle of the airport. So quite a big hit actually, but thankfully did not hit the civilians. But that gives you a pretty good overview of where the missile struck right here on the camera. But with that, we're now moving into our next post here, which goes to OSINT Defender. And like I mentioned in this post right here, we do learn that the authorities at the Ben Gurion International Airport report no damage to it or nearby facilities after a ballistic missile launched by the Iranian backed Yemeni rebels impacted right outside the airport in central Israel. So once again, thankfully no casualties from this and no major damage to the airport itself, but of course it was quite a scare as you did see those civilians running right off from the airport thinking that they were about to be hit next. So once again, a pretty rare miss by the Israeli air defense of this missile getting through, but thankfully it didn't hit anything of importance. But with that, we're now jumping into our next post here, which goes to Joe Truzman. So there were a lot of missile fragments that did actually fall down on the roadway where civilians were at, but once again, not even the fragments caused any casualties, thankfully, but we do have videos showing that right here. So let's take a look at the two videos that we have. And there you have it. It appears to be some police or first responders showing up to the scene, and as you can see, there's debris pretty much everywhere right here. And also it appears to be that there is a stopped car right there. I assume they got out and ran after they heard the missile exploding, but the ambulance appears to be pulling up to that car to check on them. And as you can see, there's the control tower for the airport, and there's the surrounding area that this person is filming right here on the camera. So that was our first video, but let's take a look at our second one. And here you can see in the second video, there is some more security blocking off the area where the missile fragments did fall near the airport, and they are closing it down, so make sure that people don't drive over the missile fragments. So there's more proof of it and the aftermath of the scene on the ground at the Ben Gurion airport. But with that, we're now jumping on to our next post here, which goes to Clash Report, and we also actually got the CCTV footage showing the exact moment the ballistic missile impacted right near the airport itself, which this is actually remarkable footage, and the fact that we saw the exact moment it came in from an aerial view, that is quite a scene to see on camera. So let's take a look at this one and see it actually coming in at the exact moment it did. And here you have it. There's the missile, and there it is striking right next to the airport. That was quite a direct hit, I must say, even though it did not hit the airport itself. That was extremely close. A very close call right there. Unfortunately, they did not intercept it, like I mentioned, but thankfully it didn't hit the airport, because if it did, it could have caused some very severe casualties. So a pretty bad miss-up by the Israeli air defense, but once again, it is pretty rare, even at that. But jumping into our next post here, this one goes to Phytux News. So we have seen a response to this attack at the airport, and we're learning in this post from Phytux that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu blames Iran for the Yemeni rebel missile strike on Ben Gurion Airport, and he also vows retaliation against both the Yemeni rebels and their Iranian masters at a time and place of Israel's choosing. And this is also echoing the statements from the US president that made a statement on Truth Social about this attack on the Ben Gurion Airport. So once again, there's a major escalation coming here, and once again, Netanyahu just committed to an attack on Iran in response to this airport attack. We're really not sure what the timeline is going to look like, nor do we know if the United States is going to be involved in it, but that's a pretty big statement to make over the attack on the airport, so a pretty big escalation coming right out of it. But jumping into our next post here, this one's going to go to World Source News 24/7. And even though we don't know the exact timeline of an Israeli retaliation attack against Iran, we have heard from a spokesperson for the German airline group Lufthansa that they are suspending flights to and from Tel Aviv until May the 6th due to the current situation. And we're really not sure if that means that an attack is about to be imminent between Israel and Iran, but we may think that it could also be maybe they're scared to send flights there since one missile just made it through the air defense. So it's not really clear what that means, but once again, Lufthansa is suspending flights to Tel Aviv at least for a couple of days. So that is a big piece of news and could be a clue as to some major escalation coming in the next couple of days. But with that, we're now moving on to our next post here, which goes to open source intel once again. And we are now going to move on from our Israel attack news on the airport and move on to our news about Iran, because there's some big explosions still taking place in Iran today, even after the major ones we just saw yesterday. So we have seen that a massive fire has been reported in Tehran's District 22, and we're not sure what started this fire, but once again, it is a very large one, and another mysterious case of a sudden combustion inside of Iran in just the last couple of days. So let's take a look at the video and see how large the fire is. And there you see it, right outside of Tehran, a major fire right there, right next to it. It appears to be maybe a construction site of places. I did see a crane. I actually see two cranes right there. This could be a construction site, and whatever is caught on fire here, it looks like it spread quite rapidly, and it is now spreading to other surrounding areas. So we do see that here in our first video, but let's take a look at our second video. And the second video here is another angle of the fire from it appears to be a different roadway, but as you can see, there was that crane again, and there is the fire. It's still spreading even on this video as well. So a pretty big one. We don't know what it is, but once again, another weird and mysterious fire breaking out near Tehran. But with that, we're now moving on to our next article, which goes to open source intel once again. And as we see right here in this post, separate from the major fire we did see outside of Tehran, we have seen that according to Iranian media, a motorcycle factory just blew up in spectacular fashion in Mashhad, which is a northeastern city in Iran. So this is way away from Tehran. This is nowhere near it, and there's another major explosion happening right here. And of course, we have seen major targets blowing up over the last couple of days, including a port and other critical infrastructure like power plants across Iran. And this is looking like way more than coincidences. This appears to be, in my opinion, a coordinated effort by some force to start taking down critical infrastructure inside of Iran. So that is my assumption, and I think a lot of people will probably agree with that, considering the frequency of these major explosions. But let's take a look at the video and see this factory on fire. And there you have it, a major fire there at this motorcycle factory, and that is almost like the scenes you'd see coming out of Russia with the covert sabotage attacks by Ukraine on these different facilities. So quite severe and quite massive, and it makes you wonder what starts a major fire and explosion like this at a motorcycle plant of all places. So I don't know, but of course I do think that maybe it is covert sabotage by a force like Israel, but we do see that right there on camera. But with that, folks, we're now moving on to our next article here, which goes to Nexta. And it is now time to move away from our Israel and Iran news and onto our India-Pakistan news, because there's still humongous escalations happening between India and Pakistan, and today we have learned that India has halted the water flow to Pakistan for the first time in 65 years, and for the first time since 1960, India has cut off the water from the Bangalore Dam, breaching the Indus Waters Treaty, and apparently they're planning another cut to another dam, and Pakistan sees this as an act of aggression. So let's take a look at our video here. We do have a picture and video evidence showing the dam being cut off by India with the water flow to Pakistan. So let's take a look. So there you can see it. There is the dam controlled by India that controls the water flow to Pakistan, and it appears to be bone dry. It looks like it has been shut off, and there is no more water flowing down to Pakistan. And this is one of the first formal breaches of the treaty by India that we have seen. And as you can see, there's a very low water flow going through that river right there, right below the dam. So we have heard reports before that the water has been cut off. We've had a very, very strong lack of, I guess you could say, video evidence proving that, but we do now have the video evidence here showing the dam being cut off right there on camera. But with that, folks, we are now moving on from that post and on to our next one here, which goes to the Pakistan Observer. And in addition to the dam being cut off by India, we are learning today from the Pakistan Observer that reports of exchange of fire along the LOC, the line of contact between Pakistan and India, have increased, and now there's clashes, very large clashes, against the border guards of each country, and they're going on for the consecutive 11 days between the border forces. So once again, more fighting still ramping up between these border forces of India and Pakistan, and we're seeing no end in sight, and especially now the dam has been cut off once again, or at least for the first time, whichever one you choose to believe. It looks like this is about to escalate once again very rapidly between two nuclear armed countries. So quite severe to see, and once again a very concerning development. But jumping into our next post here, this one's going to go to Null Reports. And it is now time to move on from our India and Pakistan news and onto our Russia-Ukraine news, because also that front is popping off as well. And today we've gotten some very concerning statements from Putin about the potential use of nuclear weapons in the war against Ukraine. And today Putin has made a statement at a press conference. He said that Ukraine wants to provoke us to make us slip, and he said there was no need to use nuclear weapons, and I hope that there won't be a use for nuclear weapons, and we have enough forces to bring what we started in 2022 to a logical conclusion with the result that Russia needs. And once again, note the language by Putin right there. Not only is he basically indirectly threatening nuclear weapons usage inside of Ukraine, but he's also saying basically he is not negotiating in peace talks whatsoever, and he is going to finish what he started, according to his own words, and bring it to a conclusion that Russia needs, which is basically taking over the entire country of Ukraine. So there's a direct statement by Putin showing his real true intentions, and also a pretty clear threat to me of using nuclear weapons toward Ukraine. So very disturbing to hear once again. And of course, we have heard reports before that Putin has considered using a tactical nuke in certain circumstances. And of course, the May 9th Victory Day parade is coming up, and there are rumors that Ukraine might attack it, and that might be a justification for Russia to nuke Ukraine potentially as a result of that attack. So we are waiting to see if that's going to happen. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to War Translated. And we've also gotten another statement from Putin indicating that he has no interest whatsoever in the peace talks, and also proving the fact that he was stalling the entire time he was negotiating with the United States officials. Today, Putin stated that reconciliation with the Ukrainian part of the Russian people is irreversible, effectively confirming his imperial intentions to subjugate Ukraine. So that is once again another statement proving that Putin had no interest in peace whatsoever, and he was playing the United States basically to stall for time so he could attack more Ukrainian cities. And that was something that most people did realize very early on, and now the rest of the people have realized it as well, and now Putin is making that very clear with his own statements. But with that, we're now moving on to our next article here, which goes to War Translated once again, and in this post right here, we get some more details of the exact circumstances around which the US and Russia talks came to an abrupt end behind the scenes. And we can see right here that Russian sources claim the Kremlin halted talks with the United States after the Ukraine and US signed the mineral deal, and a Kremlin insider reports that the top Russian officials are forced to urgently revise their White House engagement strategy. So it looks like the Ukraine-US mineral deal was the turning point in this whole situation with peace talks, and now the aid is flowing back to Ukraine once again from the United States side, and now Russia is completely backed off and taking a hands-off approach after the deal has been signed. So that was the nail in the coffin, and we've been wondering what was the nail in the coffin, and it appears to be the mineral deal was that. So it looks like the aid is going to start reflowing once again, and the deal was the crux of the issue. So with that, we're now moving on to our next article here, and this one goes to War Translated yet again. And while Russia was still yapping and losing the war at the exact same time, we've heard today that Ukraine struck the Strela plant in the Bryansk Oblast of Russia once again tonight, and it tied to Rostec, and it produces radar gear for Russia's defense industry, and the admin building is reportedly burning to the ground according to the reports. So it looks like Ukraine struck another critical site for Russia's defense industry, and they have caused severe damage to it while Putin was out there yapping. So let's take a look at the video and see Ukraine in action. And as you can see right there, it looks like that's a lot of black smoke rising from the admin building of a very critical defense site for Russia that helps to produce radar equipment as well. And it looks like it is burning quite badly, at least according to this video we have right here. And I don't think the lucky strikes are going to save them from this one, because it looks like it's going to keep spreading just like all the fires do in Russia, because the fire department's incompetent. So we do see that right there once again, another big hit by the Ukrainian forces right on a critical site. But with that, we're now moving on to our next post here, which goes to War Translated yet again. And speaking speaking of the May 9th Victory Day Parade, I did mention that just a moment ago, and that is coming up right around the corner. We've gotten a very disturbing statement today from Zelensky about what could happen on the day of May the 9th on the Russian side. And we have heard a statement where Zelensky said, quote unquote, "We know who we're dealing with," speaking of Putin, and Russia may stage provocations on May the 9th. It's their style, and they talk of a partial ceasefire, but today's assaults are the most intense in months. And this is one thing I'm very concerned about myself, because of course the May 9th parade is not being attended by Putin in person. He is attending via Zoom because he's scared about security, and also Fico and also Vucic, I believe, of Serbia, are not showing up to this either because they suddenly got ill and sick and decided not to show up. Also, in addition to that, the Indian defense minister is not showing up either. So I'm beginning to wonder if Russia might be planning a false flag attack on their own parade to justify a full mobilization or a nuclear launch on Ukraine, because it seems to be a bit odd that the leaders are all sort of dropping out in mass from this parade, but there's also going to be Chinese troops in attendance at this parade, and also obviously the Russian troops, because they're the ones running the parade. So I'm wondering that if Russia is planning something horrific to justify a further escalation. I'm worried about that, and right now we just don't know if that's going to happen, because right now it is just a rumor and speculation, but we'll have to wait and see. But with that, we're now jumping on to our last post of the video, which goes to Max24. And we also have some news about North Korea when it comes to their involvement in the Ukraine-Russia war, and right now we are seeing that Kim Jong-un states that the DPRK is carrying out a mass rearmament by producing new equipment because they're selling so much equipment to Russia, they need to replenish their own stocks. So it's a bit weird that a country that has such a lack of resources like North Korea suddenly has all the resources, metals, and all the equipment they need to develop so many pieces of equipment, and even though it is pretty much junk, it still is equipment, so that is used on the front line. So it makes me wonder if North Korea is getting help from somewhere to keep developing this much equipment, and they're also selling a whole hell of a lot of it to Russia, which they're using on the front lines right now. So as you can see, here's some photos of it. There's an assembly line of one of these types of equipment being produced, and there is some tanks being produced, and of course Kim Jong-un knows how to put the bolts together the best, so he's showing up to show them how to do that. So we're also seeing in the next photo here, there's some more leaders looking at some, it appears to be some turrets or barrels for a tank, and we also have some more photos here showing the road wheels of a tank. But anyways, we are now done with the news for the day, and that is our last post of the video. But before you leave, smack the like button, and also if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel as well for more daily war updates just like this one, and also go down to the comments below and put LSA down there if you watch the video to this point. And also, by the way, I do see all those comments every single day. Sadly, there are so many of them, there's actually thousands. I can't heart every single one of them, so just know that I do see them every day, and I wish I could heart every single one of them, but that takes like a couple hours to do that. So also, if you want to support the channel financially, you can do so on our Patreon page, and the link is down below for the Patreon in the description if you want to sign up for a monthly membership over there and support the channel that way, which is a very big help, and a huge shout out to our Patreon supporters for helping to make the videos possible. And with that, folks, we'll see you all tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on our nightly war news stream, and with that, bye-bye for now.